What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, as you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, I'm going to be installing the Recon Coilover kit by Rebel Off-Road. This is going to be about 2, maybe 3-part series. I'm going to try and film as much as possible. It's getting done at a shop here in Scottsdale, Arizona, called Auto Haas. I'm going to try and stop by as much as possible, get as much footage that I can to get as much content out there as possible. I don't see too many videos about installing this kit, so should be a good time. Without further ado, let's head on in there and get this thing installed. So starting off at the top is removing the rear shocks. Removing the rear shocks is super easy. It's 1 bolt on the bottom, 1 bolt on the top. So as you can see, we start with the right side and work our way over to the left. Doesn't matter which side you obviously start with. And then once you get the rear shocks removed, next is going to be disconnecting the rear control arms. You'll see kind of a common theme. We start with the right side, move over to the left. After you move the rear control arms, you're going to want to remove a couple of the other bolts that are associated with the axle. And then after that, you're going to move the rear track bar and then a plug that goes onto the axle. So once all the bolts are removed, next up is going to be grinding off the bottom of the rear shock mount. In order to get the lower coilover bucket to fit, you need to cut off a little bit of the shock mount. As you can see, we got the axle or the brake covered, protect it, and you need to cut off a little over 1 inch of metal in order to fit for the bracket to fit over it. So it's been a busy day at the shop. Looks like we're getting it all started. Got the rear top. Almost time for the coilovers. So as you can see, everything's already in there. Getting there. Obviously you could do this before, but we are just now getting over to removing the rear springs. Those obviously fall out once the control arms and track bar are disconnected, because then the axle has nothing holding it up besides the drive shaft. But once you remove that, the axle is pretty much free floating in order to get the coilovers to fit. What is going on, guys? Welcome back. Today is day 2 of the Rebel Off-Road build. Gonna walk into the shop, see what the kind of the progress is. Didn't get much done yesterday. The shop was extremely busy. No worries today. Hopefully we're gonna make some sweet progress. I'm gonna be here to film most of it. So without further ado, let's start heading into the shop. Next up is gonna be drilling out one of the upper coilover mounts holes. You need to drill it out just a bit in order to get the bolt to fit. As you can see, we are lining up the hole in order for it to fit perfectly. Once we get the pilot hole started, then is drilling it out. As you can see, we're removing the bracket in order to finish up drilling the hole. Now comes the fun part, is installing the rear coilovers. These were kind of tough. It took a few tries to get them up in there. The coilovers are super heavy, and it's kind of an awkward distance and angle to try and get the top to fit in there. It did require a little bit of grinding of the powder coat. The powder coat was super thick on the inside, but once we got that taken care of, the bolt went in super nice. So obviously starting off with the top, so then the axle can still sit there and float. Once the bolt is in, obviously you just want to get it tightened on there. Don't want this coilover falling off to either break it, damage it, or hurt somebody. Once again, these coilovers are super heavy, and the car was about 6 feet off the ground, so that landing on your foot would not be fun. And once you get the one side in, obviously hop over to the other side. Once we kind of figured out about grinding off the powder coat, the other coilover went in super easy, and then it's just a matter of putting the bolt in and then putting the nut on. Once you get that done, installing the rear. Once you get that done, installing the lower half, super easy. The axle is supported by a stand, so in order to get that fit, you just raise and lower the axle depending on where the coilover is at. As you can see, the thing in the middle. Once the axle is lifted, the coilovers go in super easy. Use the factory bolts and then tighten it on up, and that is pretty much the rear end. Other than that, I didn't film too much of installing the mounts, but it's all the hardware is provided by Rebel Off-Road. As you can see, the goldish bolt. And now that that's all installed, you got the rear pretty much done. Obviously, we are waiting on the long arms still, so we can't use the coilovers fully yet, so it was a little bit tight, but we got it all on there. And next up is going to be part 2.
Next up is going to be part 2, and that's where we install, take apart the front and install the front coilovers. I didn't get to film much of this just because I wasn't there when it happened, but got pretty much a good amount of that film. So stay tuned for part 2, and I'll see you guys in the next one.